That is why I did not upload it to the YouTube. I'm very sorry about that. But I'll make sure I get this lecture, okay? So back to what I was saying. The challenge is taking these abstract theories, concepts, these events that happened in time, and making a causal, developing a causal relationship. But as you will find as you move along in the field of public administration, an administration of really any type, you will start to make these causal relationships, because in essence a lot of things don't happen overnight. They take time to evolve. Our public policy process takes time to evolve. Our public agencies, how they respond to our public challenges, they don't happen overnight. They take time to evolve. All right? So what we'll do is we'll go over the questions right quick and see what some of the answers are, so we can get more depth to it. So question one, does anyone want to try to address that? It's boss politics.
A political machine is a political organization in which an authoritative boss or small group demands the support of a court or supporters and businesses, usually campaign workers, to receive rewards for their efforts. The machine's power is based on the ability of the workers to get out the vote of their candidates on election day. They are essential to political machines which rely on hierarchy and rewards for political power, often enforced by strong party whip structure. Machines sometimes have a political boss, often rely on patronage, the spoil system side behind the scenes, control and long-standing political ties within the structure of representative democracy. Machines typically are organized on a permanent basis instead of a single election or event. The term may have a pejorative sense, referring to corrupt political machines.
Okay. Very complete answer. Very good. Very good. Does anyone want to add anything to that? What did Boss Tweed do? What position did he assume to become the boss? Huh? He was a senator, but what else? What was the key position?
No. Administrative buildings and railroad stuff like that.
He was in charge of a lot of things. What was that one key position? Tammany Hall. But what was the one key position? Democratic Party leader. I'm sorry. I heard Democratic. I'm sorry. Democratic Party leader. Right? Why was that important? They had to be approved by him. Right? I mean, in this, there's a lot of power, right? There are a lot of people around, right? There are a lot of people that are elected to office. Once you're elected to office, there's a lot of decisions to be made that impact a lot of people's lives, right? But somewhere in this, even the political parties, they're organized in some way or another. And the key for the party boss was to be in control of the political organization, especially the political organization that was in power. That was the key, right? But once you're in power, are you going to do it? Are you just going to relinquish power easily? Why not? right? Money, power, and influence, right? So there's an incentive for the system. Does anyone want to add anything to that? What is the problem with the system? It's corrupt. So what's the problem with that?
It's an unfair system.
Okay, articulate that. How's it unfair?
Because if I want a job, then I have to pay into the party. That's not very democratic.
You have to be loyal to the party.
Yeah.
You have to pay into it either through your labor, getting votes out there, or something, right? What's the problem with that in terms of service delivery?
It wasn't people-centered. They're not really out for the benefit of the people. So,
Okay. What's the outcome of it? How does that translate into the day-to-day management of different operations?
That's all there is. You can take as much time or as little time as you want. And if you've hired everybody, and you can go along a project or get it done in 3 days. You have the power of money, people, everything.
Okay, does anyone want to add anything else? What about this back side of the room? It's very quiet, and this side of the room over here.
So the system was based on the network. So it's if you know someone, not really in terms of what you know, but who you know. So there wasn't a matter of trust amongst the people to the formal structure of the government.
Okay. You have a system of governance that's based upon who you know as opposed to what you know, right? How does that impact service delivery? How you doing, Damon?
Doing well. I found that for service delivery, if you have people that are put in based on nepotism or the fact that you know someone, they're not going to be proficient. They may not be able to complete the projects on time. They may not even have the knowledge to get the right people aligned for the larger assignments that they have to complete.
Exactly. You don't have the right people in the right place. If people are placed in positions based upon who they know, as opposed to what they know, their capacity to carry out the task put before them may be limited. Right? Someone that needs to operate a complex piece of machinery, who's never sat in a math class, any type of engineering class, may not be better at operating that complex piece of machinery than someone who sat through, say, an engineering degree. That's just a random example, but last week in class I also mentioned some of the complex projects that started to come up because of population increase. All right? So at some point, the capacity of the public agencies to solve complex challenges was really reached its limit based upon that style of governance. All right? What happened in Stockton, Virginia?
It first city manager.
First city manager. What forced them to create that position? Because it had never been created before.
The need of the district, the development, the non-development district.
Non-development of the district.
We need that, dealt with the road, and things that that wasn't a good service. So we had someone who was trying to manage that district.
Okay. Somebody else?
wasn't how the administration was, it wasn't organized as a story, so they needed to put someone in place to manage all of the city administration.
How is it in disarray? Tell me some of the attributes or some of the things that we're talking about.
There was nobody like to handle like the city functions such as like maintaining the streets and sewers and
capacity was limited. Go ahead, David.
I thought the irony of it was that the city manager actually paved the way for more city managers in the positions, kind of responsibilities. One being that these committees couldn't make a decision on what contract to use or to even find someone to pave the streets. Once the city manager took over, they were able to get the right, the highest bid or whatever, the lowest bid, whatever you want to call it, to get the streets paved within, the first so many weeks of his deployment. So just to see that efficiency and proficiency was phenomenal.
Results, right? What else? Is there a hand back there? No? Okay, okay.
And also, well, not him, but it was the first city manager, Ashburner.
Yes.
He said it was stated that he was like receiving bids for the city, but also decided that it would be more cost efficient for the city went into their own payment business.
To their own paving business. Why is that? What were the contractors doing? They're charging 2 or 3 times the cost of a project. Why? Because it was the government. They didn't have their affairs in order. They were spending 2 or 3 times as much as they took in revenue. It was a mess. All the elected officials, depending on where you were elected, you got placed in charge of a department. Because you get elected to a position doesn't mean you have a special special training in the management of day-to-day government. People who didn't really know about building streets and buildings were placed in charge of building the streets and buildings. And over time, the capacity, the local government's ability to do basic things such as pave the street, the main road, the mud is what really got on people's nerves. Something simple as mud, right? Caused people to complain. And in that, how should I say, they were forced, the city council of Staunton was forced to find another way of addressing the day-to-day problems of the city. And the day-to-day problems at that time was basic things: paving roads, building water systems, building sewer systems, creating an environment so businesses can operate without having to worry about basic things. And in a way, this was 100 years ago when the United States was developing the foundation. We were going through a nation building at that time. But these basic things such as water and roads, they impact millions of people's lives today because they do not have these basic things. When you drive outside the United States, you'll see outside of every large metropolitan area around the world, shacks, shack towns, called townships, some places, favelas in other places, different things, but it's informal housing. People move to the city, can't afford what's called fixed housing, right? So they move, they build a house in a particular place, no running water, no sewer. Sometimes there's not paved roads, which creates health and safety challenges. There are countless individuals, young children that die every year from basic waterborne diseases, health and safety challenges, so forth and so on. So yeah, in the United States, these are, it's in some respect, it's difficult, especially when you grow up in an area or a society where roads, water, ever since you were born, you go turn on the tap, water comes out, right? But we went through a major process to even get to that point, right? And the way that the United States was governed for 100 years, that's a long period of time. Boss politics, and it worked, right? It was democratic in a way, right? Especially at a time when this was the only democracy in existence. But at some point, when society became more complex, complicated, that system of governance, it could not meet the needs of the day. So we had to find another way of managing our public agencies, right? And this really came together during the progressive reform movement, which was not a coherent movement. They called for a lot of different things, a lot of different changes in society, but it was a progression to try to create a more better society, more impactful, make our public agencies more responsive to the needs of people in our society. All right. One of the challenges, especially in learning about the development of the field of public administration, why it doesn't fit so neatly together, which is one of the challenges, especially when you start the program and try to weave all of these ideas and concepts together, is that these things didn't happen overnight. They happened over durations of time. The different ideas and concepts that are taken from different places and brought together. But what you start to understand is that the United States, basic theories and concepts, people from different places brought together. That's why it's not neat. That's why a lot of things are conflictual. But once you start to understand that, then you can see there's room for you to maneuver. There's room for our agencies to maneuver. All right? Better understand the parameters. Any questions? Any questions on the homework assignment that we have not addressed that stumped anyone? There's no shame in it now. The shame is when you're taking the midterm exam and you don't know because you did not ask now. Yes?
Can you just go over number 2 a little bit? Why was politics the department of the name of governor for the first one?
Okay, why was it permanent means? It was more of an evolution, right? We never had a strong administrative apparatus. It was permanently left out. What I mean by administrative apparatus is in the Constitution an administrative structure. Meaning like an administrative state, meaning departments that are given powers in our Constitution. It was left out. One of the theories by Stillman in the readings is that because the colonial government under the British was so efficient in carrying out policies from the king, the framers of the Constitution did not want, say, the president, if he would come to power, to be so powerful. So power was distributed throughout our system of governance in 3 branches, with one of the branches not being an administrative state. Now, with that said, not being an administrative state, you have 2 branches. The presidency, who's elected, who has a cabinet, but you also have the House, which is political. Underneath that, your state governments fell under that same framework, having a governor who was the elected chief executive. But in there, there was never the development of an administrative apparatus that was given constitutional powers. So, in order to run government, you needed to become elected, not trained in schools of administration. There's no document that specifically states that. So scholars of public administration were left to wonder why schools of administration existed for hundreds of years in Europe. So why didn't we adopt that same method in the United States? It's part of the negotiation. But it's politics, really, to obtain power. The United States, you had to be elected. Go back to the Stillman article for that. What else?
The what article?
Stillman. It's 1992, talks about peculiar statelessness. What else?
How did city management be become elected after the last reform?
underlying the progressive reform movement, there was this drive for citizens to have a say in what government does. They no longer wanted political machines running our governments, our local and state governments, because political machines, everything they did was just to keep the party in power, was not necessarily to advance the needs of society. All right? Under that boss system, there was one or two people who controlled everything. The machine revolved around them. So on one hand, there was a push to do away with that, to have, so citizens can have more input in the day-to-day functions of government. Now the contradiction here is that when you hire a professional administrator to run the day-to-day affairs of government, then one, the system revolves around them now. Think about it, in a city, the city manager, they hire the police chief, they hire the fire chief, they hire the public works director, they hire the parks department. They present the executive budget to the city council, and the council has to vote on that. They know the ins and outs of everything that's going on, right? Yet they're more insulated. They don't have to be elected by the people. They just have to be appointed by 5 or 7, if may, city council members. Right? They're also insulated. Like I said, they're insulated. Anyone up under them, the directors, they're appointed by the city manager. All of the staff, protected by civil service, they're appointed, they're given a lifetime appointment to that position. So that mitigates the amount of input in a way, or the amount of power that the input would have on the day-to-day affairs. The amount of input the citizens will have in the day-to-day affairs of the function of government. Because those administrators are not elected officials, they're appointed officials. All right? Anything else?
So what was the reaction of the people then? Like what did they do? So we saw that the film that showed, in the rural communities that they kind of just did their own thing and there was no one to listen to. But if there was a charismatic individual who was the loudest, it seemed like that became the leader of the group. But in some of the urban communities, what was it like?
Urban communities, you mean in terms of administration or politics, or what it took to get elected? Or?
I'm just thinking in terms of the societal atmosphere.
Of the early 1900s or 20s? Well, it depends on the communities, it depends on location, it depends on the urban environment, but there's great transformation, right? We're going through American Industrial Revolution. People from all throughout this country are moving to the big cities, but also there's great waves of immigration that are coming to the cities. You can also imagine that there are housing challenges, great housing challenges, because people were moving to the city, but they may not have had the income to buy fixed housing, right? So we had shacks, but also buildings were overcrowded. When I say overcrowded, multiple people to a room, right? That's why they started implementing building codes, saying rooms has to be a certain size, have to have windows, things of that nature. Fire escapes. There was also social challenges when different groups were brought together, right, forced to live amongst each other. There's always this conflict, like we have today in our society. Social conflict. There was also this push to professionalize the services that were provided to people. Most of the, say, public agencies, professional organizations, like Police Chiefs Association, Fire Chiefs Association, City Managers Association, budgeting and finance. These associations were created around the early 1900s to professionalize the delivery of services. More specific than that, you can look it up. All right. So today's lecture, we're going to go over what we'll call the building blocks of Orthodox administration. Orthodox meaning original. And this is developed within the American context. The reason why we call it building blocks is because these are theoretical concepts that developed over time. And as this field of public administration developed, because we had great needs in society that need to be met, these concepts were taken and brought together, and they built this field of public administration. All right? Oh, before I forget, I think I mentioned it here last week.
Yes.
Governance in Brazil, Rio and Salvador. We're going to have a trip during the winter intercession. It will go from January 9th to 19th, which is, we'll leave Friday night and come back to the MLK Day. I'm going to have an information session next Tuesday at 6 p.m., 6 to 7, so it'll be before this class, and we'll have it in Science 101A. That's the next building over in the basement. I will send out an email either tomorrow or the following day.
Is it the 19th or
The 19th. Yesterday I may have had the 18th on it, yeah. We'll go over the program itinerary, tell you what you need, program cost breakdown. We'll also have a financial aid individual there to meet with the people who use financial aid right outside in an office so they can answer any questions that you may have. And we'll try to answer any questions that you may have. All right? And then for it, there'll be mandatory meetup sessions, so if you do dates. things like that.
What's the room again? I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
The room?
Oh, Science 101A?
101A.
Basement, yeah. The philosophy of our time is nothing but the spirit of that time expressed in abstract thought. Can anyone try to tell me what this means? The philosophy of our time is nothing but the spirit of our time expressed abstract thought. Philosophy, spirit, abstract thought. Take a stab at it.
maybe it means at a present time of any situation, whatever philosophy you thought it, whatever it is, the situation is, that's how you express it in an abstract thoughts.
Okay, he's working through it, Does anyone want to refine that or add to it?
Possibly is the thinking of the thinkers of that time who contemplated on the situation, they put their thought and the spirit behind this wall of construction, trying to construct an idea, construct a pattern, which would be a solid foundation.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Damien.
I think it's a bit of a paradox because it's a hard way to describe something that it's saying it's hard to describe. What I mean by that is saying that the spirit of something which is intangible, you can't get at it, of our time, is expressed in an abstract thought, in an abstract way. So it's almost like our understanding of what's happening at this time is too hard to get at, to express in words.
Okay, almost, you're wrapping around, and all of these answers are very good, very good. Anyone else? Philosophy. What is philosophy? Love of knowledge, the law. What else? Ways of thinking, right? Philosophy, to philosophize, a way of thinking. Think about something, right? Think about what? Our time. What are some of the things that are happening today in our time? War. Is that new?
No.
What else? Poverty. All right. Is that new?
So things that happened before are actually happening now.
It's like, it's,
A way of knowing.
A way of knowing. What else?
I think some people have said it, it's almost like that it's things that have happened in the past, the spirit of our past in some sense. It's just expressed in a current mode of what's happening every day, and this is a long string of things that's happened throughout the past, related to today.
Well, is it that we're still practicing the things now we're doing now what we still done in the past? We still have the same way of thinking?
He says the philosophy of our time is nothing but the spirit of that time expressed in abstract thought.
Well, predicted things that were predicted in the past.
Predicted in the past? How do you predict? Do you predict the past or you predict the future? Okay. So philosophy, right? It's knowledge, right? Knowledge about what? What's going on in our time, right? If you're thinking really, really deeply and hard about the challenges that we face in our own society, then you start to develop philosophies on how to address those challenges. But every time period in every society has challenges. But different time periods, how should I say, the importance of certain challenges take precedent during different time periods. All right? So the number one issues that were on, say, the president's desk, the president of the United States desk in 1912 are not the exact same challenges that are on the president's desk in 2014. All right? Now, it could be war, but it's a different location. But even if it was the same location, the entire dynamic of war is different. What you're trying to achieve may be the same, or it may be different. All right? But the way that it's carried out is different. All right? This is saying, Woodrow Wilson, he got this from Hegel in the 1600s, who was a philosopher, European philosopher. The reason why I say this is because every generation, every society grapples with societal challenges. That means that people think about these challenges. They develop a language about the challenges. That becomes a philosophy of their time because it's going to impact the way that that society addresses those challenges. Sometimes that society will succeed. Sometimes that society will fail. Just like today, we have challenges. In some ways, some things we will succeed. Some things, I won't say we will fail, but we will leave for future generations. But the stakes are high. What if climate change is real? And we do nothing about it. We just make things worse. What will happen? whole host of challenges will occur, right? You can try to map out, you can try to strategize, you can try to mitigate the fallout of your country, right? But you can never really tell, right? President Obama last week was at the UN, all right? What was he talking about? Was he talking about climate change? He's trying to rally support, all right? As we move forward in our own society, we'll grapple with challenges, issues, and we'll develop philosophies on how to address those challenges and issues. That will be this generation. The next generation will also do the same. And a lot of times, the decisions that are made, you won't know if they're successes or failures until later on down the line. Now, hopefully, we have more successes than failures. But in this, what I want you to get from this lecture is that societies develop ways to address the challenges of their times. During the late 1800s, early 1900s, the challenge was developing a governance structure that can that had the capacity to address the challenges of the rapidly growing nation of the United States. What I mean by that is the industrialized nation of the United States. Because if that generation did not meet their challenges, the United States will not enjoy the benefits of being the sole superpower as it does today. It could be another nation. Time is always, things change. All right? Woodrow Wilson was 28th president. Does anyone know which president we're on? What number we're on now? 44. Wow, that's good. Good. 44. Woodrow Wilson. He was one of the most productive presidents that we've had. Started off as a professor. Well, actually, started off as a lawyer from Virginia, the School of Virginia. Grew up in the South. Father was a professor. He got a law degree, moved to Atlanta. He was going to make it big. He was going to get rich. What happened? Practice. It wasn't that successful. People wouldn't pay their bills. So what he did, he said, okay, he left after a couple of years. He went back to school, get a PhD, studied political science. Got a job as a professor. The one university, I don't recall what it was, but then he went to Princeton. After that, he rose up through the ranks really quickly. In between 8 to 10 years, no, between 12, about 10 to 12 years, he became president of the university, which at that time was unheard of. Very much unheard of this time too. But he rose up fast because he was sharp. He was a fast learner. He knew how to talk to people, right? Socialize, find what the real challenge is, and forge a solution. At his time in Princeton, he said, listen. Well, he didn't say listen to a lot of people, but he said to himself. He said, look, self, I like being a president here, prestigious university, gives me a lot of benefits, but I have more aspirations. I want to be governor. And lo and behold, he became governor of New Jersey. What he had to do is he went to the state machine. He said, listen, if you put me on the ballot, I'll work for you. The trouble is, after he got elected, he shunned the machine. So he made enemies. That didn't stop him. He went, became president of the United States at a rapidly changing time in this nation. But back before he became president, when he was a young professor, he wrote an article, published it. It's called The Study of Administration. That is considered the first piece of academic literature that forms the basis of Public Administration and the American Context. This was written in 1887, 100 years after the founding of this nation. We're going to go through that in the next couple slides. But before that, I want to say he had a very progressive agenda. Federal Reserve Act. He developed, this act developed the central banking system in the United States. Does anyone know what the the Federal Reserve is? Who knows what it is?
Say that again, please.
The Federal Reserve Bank. What does the Federal Reserve do?
FDIC insures your money. Insure your money up to $250,000.
They insure your money. That's one of the things they do. What else do they do? What's the big thing they do? Pay the bills. I hope they pay their bills. What do they do? Print money. What is that about? What's it called? They set interest rates. What does that do? That controls, it impacts the amount of money that goes into the economy, or they'll try to slow down the economy. Why? To try to control inflation. Why? To try to balance out the growth or slowdown of the economy. Federal Trade Commission Act. Fair trade, curb unfair business practices. All right? Clayton Antitrust Act. This was one of the first major pieces of legislation that went after large businesses that were monopolies. The challenge with monopolies is to charge high prices. For the most part, provide inferior services. Expanded the personal income tax to the majority of citizens. It's major, right? Banned child labor and interstate commerce. At this point in time, there were about 2 million children working. The country was about 90 million people at this time. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1919. He laid the foundation for what would become today the United Nations. Right? He was very forward-thinking. He did a lot to expand the capacity of government in our society because he believed, well, from his actions you assume, that government had a strong role to play in our society. He also had a lot of critics, especially on the domestic front. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote 2 open letters to Woodrow Wilson, calling him to do more on race relations in the country. Because up under him, federal agencies became more segregated, because this was after Reconstruction of the South. And he did not act upon domestic racial challenges, racial relations. He also had a lot more critics that felt that he was pushing the expansion of government too far, infringing upon the power of the legislature. But he's considered the founder of this modern field of public administration. Study of administration. It's a key document that you will need to learn and understand. It's broken down into 3 sections. First is a history of administration. He starts off by saying that even though Europe is ruled by monarchs, kings, they have something that we need. An efficient method for carrying out business of government. For the most part, the business of government is similar whether you have kings or there's a democracy. Because once a decision is made to do something, systems that are needed for carrying out taxes, delivering the postal service, running a military, so forth and so on, are similar. The difference between the monarchy and a democracy is that the monarchy has one ruler. They say something, it has to be done. But in democracy, there's a million rulers. Everyone in some way have an input into what the government should do, if not directly, indirectly. In the readings, he goes as far as to say that public opinion, it impacts governmental behavior. The thing about public opinion is it sways like the wind. And on many occasions, public opinion is not the most wisest. But the main impetus for bringing up the administrative studies and efficiency of the business of government that's carried out in European countries was that the United States was greatly expanding. We saw that the systems that were in place, the governmental systems, could not handle the capacity of did not have the capacity to meet the needs of society. So he's saying, listen, our society is evolving, so we need to look outside of our borders and find another society or other societies who have something to offer us, who have a way that we need to adopt. And in this, he says, philosophy is nothing more than an abstract articulation of the challenges of the day. Right? Going back to what the quote that we started off with. And in this day, the challenge was really nation building. Let me ask any of you, the United States, we're very cosmopolitan, especially in New York City. Do we learn a lot from other countries? Like what? Do we look to other countries?
Building structures.
Civil engineer, right? What else? Culture.
To borrow money.
Borrow money, right? Investments, right? Do people come here and learn a lot from us?
Yes.
Through education, all right? You got something to say, Phil?
I was just gonna say opportunity.
Opportunity. Woodrow Wilson. The United States has always been a peculiar nation. Are you serious? Yes, not next time. I don't want that. I'll take that over there somewhere. I don't mean to be rude, but. The United States is a peculiar nation. And since we have people from all over the world who come here, but a lot of times we don't travel. We don't go out, seek solutions. It was similar back in Wilson's day, but it was worse. Because we didn't have 24-hour TV. We didn't have the cell phones. All right? Didn't have internet. The nation was very inward looking, similar to how it is today. He was saying that in order to solve the challenges of our time, we have to look beyond our borders to address the challenges that we face as a nation. Section 2. I am so tolerant of the computers and things. I know people have the phones and things like that. Do you have that in a business meeting? No. Sit in meetings or at work, important meetings and things are going on. All right. Okay. I'm sorry.
I'm recording you because
You're
I'm,
recording?
yes.
Okay.
I didn't want to, remember I explained to you my situation. So I won't be able to see you. Okay.
God help us all. God help us all. Defining public administration, section 2. Defining the most economical and efficient methods for carrying out public business. When Wilson was writing, there was really no set field. This business administration was developing. But public administration, like you were saying, it existed in Europe, but even defining what is the most efficient and effective means for carrying out the work of the public had not been defined. So he has a loose definition. Let's find the most economical way to address society's challenges. Because on one hand, we can be talking about building schools, we can talk about building roads, bridges, we can talk about tax collections, we can talk about policing. These are all different services. And they all take a different type of speciality. So he was saying that any of the specialized organizations, they need to define what is the most efficient way for carrying out the public's business. And one of the least efficient methods for carrying out the public's business was running the city under the model of boss politics. Because at this point in time, society was complaining. There were a lot of complaints in society because this system was not able to meet the needs of the people.
Was it also changing because of the needs, or was it changing because the way the world was going industrial? Maybe you come from that rural area that you said last week, the rural to industrial.
Yes.
Maybe easy miles.
Yes. All right. That's one part of it. That's a major part of it, especially for the urban areas. The American Industrial Revolution. It changed the social fabric. But there are other components to it. All right? United States, every state had joined the Union. There was no open territory anymore. That meant there were laws that governed, right? Railroads needed to be laid. There was opportunity abound. And his main impetus behind it is saying, listen, this country has great opportunities, but we need to revamp our public agencies so they can actually take advantage, so we as society can take advantage of these opportunities. Because if we don't professionalize the agencies who are supposed to help set the structure for our society to develop, then we're not going to be able to take advantage of all these opportunities. He wanted to find a way to bring these business-like practices into the functions of government. But on the one hand, we're a democracy. Politics will always be part of governing. But on the other hand, you had these railroad barons. You had all these engineering projects going on. You had extremely wealthy people in the news every day talking about improved business practices. So he was looking for a way to bring these modern practices of business into the day-to-day affairs of government. So they developed what they call the politics-administration dichotomy. A theory which said politicians control the public policy-making process. They decide what needs to be done. But once the political process decides what needs to be done, they hand over that task to professionally trained administrators. Professionally trained administrators who are skilled in the art of administration. And they have specialities, whether it's police, fire, public works, accounting, lawyers, etc., etc., etc. The goal there was to try to first mitigate corruption. Because what if, when we go back to Boss Tweed in the courthouse, what if they initially decided to build a courthouse, but once that decision was made, it was given to professional administrators to actually build? Maybe it would have been cheaper. Maybe if that job would have been given to, say, Mr. Ashburn, maybe he could have built it in a year or two, right? There are all these, there were these what-ifs that were in place. But the one thing that everyone knew is that they needed to get the right people in the hallways and offices of government. So you develop this politics administration dichotomy because the challenge of that day was the bosses, or the boss politics, stranglehold on the governing structures in the United States. Any questions? Section 3. Develop in the field of public administration in the United States. Like you said, start off saying, there's an extensive study of administrative practices that already exist in Europe. All we have to do is send scholars over there to grab this information and adapt it to the needs of this nation. We need to develop schools of administration throughout the United States, train our public servants in this field. And in doing that, they can professionalize and make more efficient and increase the capacity of our public agencies. Because the needs of our society are so great. We can't trust our agencies in the hands of people who are not trained to carry out the jobs that they're supposed to do. Right? was always cautious of saying and doing is that he did not want, he was not advocating for the United States to be like the monarchs that existed in Europe. He said the saying, in order to, you can adopt the knife sharpening technique of a murderer, but you not have to adopt their murderous ways. You can apply that to a lot of different things. You can take ideas from other individuals, from other organizations, from other countries, from other societies, so forth and so on. If it works, and adapt it to your own needs. You said it already exists. Why don't we go out there, learn it, adapt to our own needs? Each and every one of you do it in some way or another. You learn from other people, you learn from other organizations, so forth and so on, right? Any questions? Scientific management. Woodrow Wilson, study of administration, that's one building block. All right. Second one, scientific management. Frederick Winslow Taylor. These are the components of this concept. And in a way, it impacts scientific management, many of your attributes, many of really things that you do in your daily routine. Scientific management has impacted each and every one of you in many ways. And as we go along, you'll start to see. Have any of you ate anything fast food this afternoon for dinner? Stopped at a fast food restaurant? Drove to a drive-through? Yesterday. All right. Fast food restaurant is a prototype of scientific management movement. Everything is measured, everything is quantified. It's as fast as it can possibly be if they're doing everything right, so to speak. All right? Under this theory, each element of work of any job is broken down into components. There's a belief that you can scientifically select and train individuals to do the job more efficient and effective. Inherent to that is some individuals are better at things than others. But if you put people through a weeding process, you can find out what they're best at and put them at that job. The best at it. In this, there's a clear delineation of authority. There's no question about who's in charge, when they're in charge. Clear hierarchy. There's a separation from planning and operations, meaning that some people are doers, some people are thinkers. This goes back to you can scientifically select individuals. There are always incentive schemes. You can work to get paid. Pay people well, they will work well. Every job is specialized. There are no jack of all trades. Everyone is a specialist at something. That's your job. But underlying all of this, there's always one best way to carry out any job. You just have to use scientific methods to figure out what that one best way is.
Finding tonight the century on Friday. It's about productivity. All sorts of businesses are finding all sorts of ways to make their workplace more efficient. And so tonight, what many people believe is the most important ism of the 20th century, as in Taylorism. It is sometimes argued that Taylorism has made the most lasting contribution to American thought since the Federalist Papers. Taylorism, you might ask? Chances are you live and work by it. Tonight, the extraordinary impact of Frederick Winslow Taylor. At the turn of the century, when the Industrial Revolution hit its stride and was beginning to change everything, Frederick Winslow Taylor became convinced that one machine could turn America into an economic powerhouse, the subway.
Frederick Taylor was the first efficiency expert. He came into the factories of the industrial Northeast and changed them.
Machines had already changed the mills of the 19th century, but the workers who ran them clung to the old ways of doing things. Trades were learned literally from watching another laborer. Workers were paid for piecework and were loath to work any faster, lest bosses lower the rate. Frederick Taylor thought the system was ridiculously inefficient.
He was the first person to come along and say, we can treat work as a science just as we can anything else. We can analyze it, we can tear it apart, and we can reconstruct it in a new, more efficient way.
Taylor was born into Philadelphia's Quaker aristocracy. He was born rich. His father never worked a day of his life. Taylor was accepted by Harvard, but he did not go. Instead, he learned about factories, how to read mechanical drawings, how to be a machinist. He became a consultant for America's steel industry when he convinced the mill owners that he could speed up production. They worked, and Taylor watched. And he timed it. He timed everything. Every job was broken up into tasks, each task timed with an eye to efficiency. Taylor determined that coal shovelers were most efficient lifting exactly 21 and a half pounds. And he designed the perfect, most efficient shovel and a schedule of how many lifts each worker should do every minute, every hour. Ready to rest? Productivity soared. The workers hated it.
The time, work, of control over the workplace, over their tools, and over their use of their bodies.
Taylor couldn't understand the animosity. He thought surely that more productivity would lead to happier workers who were better paid. By 1911, when he published his Principles of Scientific Management, the enthusiasm for Taylor's ideas had grown. In its division of labor and insistence upon speed, Henry Ford's assembly line followed Taylor's principles. Before long, Taylorism was felt everywhere. How to type faster, how to perform surgery faster. By the 1930s, Taylor's ideas of efficiency were even making themselves felt in the family kitchen.
An efficiently planned kitchen frees the housewife from fatigue.
But organized labor was never happy with Taylor. Even Hollywood was wondering where it might all lead. Taylor's one best way of doing things, organized efficiency, became central to the conduct of business in the 20th century. You can see it today on the assembly lines which produce our cars, our computers, our cheeseburgers, even our coffee.
New gurus have appeared in the managerial field, but none of them have had the influence of Taylor.
That would have pleased Taylor. He never knew the full extent of his influence. He became ill and died in 1915 at the age of 59. It is said that the last thing he did before he died was wind his wife. Taylorism, unionism, consumerism, go on our website, thecentury.com. That's our report on world news tonight. Don't forget 2020 later and Nightline I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good weekend and good night.
Okay, very interesting. What are some of the things that we saw? What was like the original way that people worked in shops? The traditional way? One individual would do all the components of the production of whatever it is that they produced. It was building a table, trying to chop down a tree or order the wood, right? They would sand it, they would build the legs, they would polish it, things of that nature, right? What did Taylor do?
Broke it up into tasks.
Watch them. Start timing. How long does it take to do this, 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 this? And then he said, well, instead of one person building the entire table, why don't we take 2 or 3 people and have one person do the legs, one person do the top, sand it, and one person polish it. The speed at which production occurred, double, triple, so forth and so on. You know, we're talking about large factories, we're talking about output, and we're talking about money, all right? Scientific management is probably one of the most revolutionary theories of management that has been developed, ever. What's the challenge with it? People overwork, tired, physically, mentally, all right? What else? You don't have control, a sense of control over their work. Any of you, when you go to work, does someone sit over your shoulder? Just look. Do they feel it? Do they do it physically or another way?
Maybe like the time clock?
Time clock, that's one, right? What's the more modern way?
Dead.
Monitor. What's the cameras and your computers, right? So you never know if they're looking at you or someone else. They're randomly going through, seeing what's going on, right? But even more than that, he broke down every task. Scientifically said it should take this amount of time to do this, right? Rapidly increase production. That's specialization. That's specialization. Any questions on this? Taylor is building block 2. Weber is 3. Max Weber, one of the founders of modern day sociology, the field of modern day sociology. He argued that it was not enough to just gather statistics about phenomena in society, about what's happening. But you have to take it further. A true philosopher or researcher takes it further. Wants to understand why this phenomenon is happening. For example, it's not good enough to just know that 20% of the population is impoverished, or many of our urban areas dropout rate is about 50%. To be a true researcher, to get a real understanding, you have to understand why that is. What are the variables? What is the cause and effect? All right? But also, Weber before he went into sociology, he was probably one of the foremost scholars of the field of public administration. Because he went and studied the field all the way from ancient Egypt, Middle Eastern societies, Rome, Greece, all the way to modern day Europe, in ancient China as well. So what is it about the governing systems that existed in these societies that first of all made their government strong? And what are the characteristics of their government? And first, he developed these leadership, this basis of leadership authority. He said that over time, different types of leaders emerged. What I mean by leaders are the people who run societies. The kings, the princes, presidents. He said that the original type of leadership authority, the basis to lead, was traditional. Rested on the belief that it had always been that way. Sanctity of tradition. You were born into that position. Society accepted it. And in some ways, someplace still accepts. He said as societies evolved and developed over time, there's this charismatic leadership developed, resting on a devotion to an exceptional sanctity of the individual, heroism, exemplary character, normative patterns that have been revealed to an individual, or an individual that's been ordained in some way or another. In essence, at some point in the history of societies to govern, it was no longer good enough to just be born into that position. There had to be something special, inherent about that individual for society at large to accept them as the leader. And then he argued that as societies evolved and continue to develop, they developed this concept of legal, rational authority. Rational meaning that it's rested in the belief of legality. But legality derives from normative patterns of behavior in society that have been codified. Breaking that down, that over time, society, there's norms that develop. Excuse me, thank you. All right? Then over time, as society has become more complex, whatever governing system writes down those norms and codifies them into law. And then as those laws continue to, they're there, but law becomes more complicated, people begin to get hired to enforce those laws. And their power rests upon those laws. It's based upon those laws. It's not their charisma or their traditional authority. All right? Any questions? Based upon that, Weber developed what is called an ideal type of bureaucracy. Ideal type can never truly be reached. But if you take what professional organizations are striving for, striving to achieve, this is what you would end up with. But it's no organization or no government is perfect enough. Because it's based upon human. first characteristic is that all public agencies, or the ideal type, there's always a jurisdiction. There are boundaries. Question. Now these are 6 characteristics, and at first they may not, they may be cloudy, they may not all make sense. Sometimes you have to relate them to something. Basically, there's jurisdiction. There's a territory in which that government agency has power, and then if they go beyond that jurisdiction, they have no power. So think of a country, think of a city, all right? Think of a state. Organization has hierarchical flow. Someone always reports to someone, and there's someone in charge. All right, there's a chain of command. There's no ambiguity in that chain of command. There are written laws that state who is in charge, when, and where. There are intentional, abstract rules and regulations that govern the actions of every administrator. Meaning that in order for someone to enforce a rule or to exercise power, there has to be a law that says they can exercise power or that they cannot exercise power. The means of production or administration belong to the office. Meaning that when somebody walks into that position or walks into the office, everything belongs to the office and the organization, not to them as individuals. I mean, all the work that they do belongs to the organization, the office, not to them as individuals. When they put on that uniform, they are no longer Jane Sally from the Bronx. They are number such and such and such and such, or officer such and such from this department. There's a clear separation from property and office. That computer, that cell phone, that uniform, that car belongs to the office, not the individual. Officials are selected based upon technical qualifications. There's some type of test, vetting process to get in, to competitive vetting process to get in. It's not about who you know, it's based upon what you know. That impacts the type of individual that goes into the organization. And last but not least, employment is a career. Lifetime appointment after you pass a certain test. Now we call it the civil service. These are our characteristics of the ideal type bureaucracy. This ideal type was developed in the early 1900s by Weber. But he did this by studying administrative systems in governments in ancient Egypt, all the way up until the modern late 1800s, early 1900s Europe. Our public agencies now strive to meet this ideal type. On paper, this is what it would look like. This is just an abstract diagram. Weber was a philosopher. He was writing this in 1912. He came to the United States a couple of times. He was an academic. He battled illness throughout his life. Sometimes he would get sick for years. He couldn't even stand in front of the classroom at some point. Sometimes in lecture because it exhausted him. So he would go home, stay at home, I'd go crazy. Sometimes we get an ingenious idea, write it out. Took a trip to the United States at one point, when our government wasn't too sophisticated, but we were starting to move down the line. And he came up with this idea of the iron cage of bureaucracy. This was in 1912 when he wrote this. Now, the iron cage is a metaphor of man, human beings, being locked within this administrative state of rules and regulations that they created for themselves. Because he argued that no one individual in society is powerful enough to take on bureaucracy. The state has resources. The state is permanent. The state has power. Individuals have power, but not as much as the state. This derives from this concept of increased rationalization, which means, in essence, increases in laws regulating more and more aspects of the daily life of every citizen. That people being hired to enforce those laws that regulate various aspects of your life. The iron cage is a metaphor that's used. He argued 100 years ago that we are locking ourselves in. If we take this rationalization to the extreme, we're locking ourselves into a system in which every aspect of our lives will be regulated. Thus, individuals will be less free. Now, on one hand, it makes society efficient. They're efficient. But on the other hand, the cost of efficiency is less freedom. And on top of that, under the theory of bureaucracy, no one individual in the bureaucracy has the power to change bureaucracy. So once it's set up, it's a living thing that we created for ourselves. And I also broke it down to this concept of social action and rationally organized actions, which is another way to come at this. Social action are things that you do voluntarily to help out others or to contribute. Volunteer at your church. Give someone change, a homeless individual change. Babysit, whether children in your family or neighbors. Right? Social action. Sometimes people get together to take on tasks within their communities, their societies, their religious organizations. That's social action. Rationally organized action is different. Rationally organized action, there are individuals hired for the purpose of carrying out some laws, some policies. They don't have personal, it's not personal. It's for a paycheck. It's based upon the concept of bureaucracy. But it's systematic. And it's probably the most efficient method that we've devised as human beings to carry out any task. Any questions? I know it's abstract, it's a concept, but it'll start to make more sense as we move along. It'll start to have larger implications.
So what's examples of the goals? So social action is like philanthropy? Or
Yes.
community giving, and then the rational organized action would be what?
Police officer pulling you over for a ticket, to give you a ticket. All right? The cable guy, installing cable or cutting cable off. All right? Walmart. I know there's not a lot in New York City. All right, have you all been to Walmart? No? Okay. Usually, when you walk into Walmart, there's a senior citizen who stands there and says, hello. That's their job, say hello. Why? Customer service, trying to give a personal touch, all right? Hello, 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 hello. And over time, it's not personal anymore. To them, they're doing it because they're paid to be out there for some reason or another, right? There's a policy. If they do not say hello to as many people as they can, there are most likely sanctions. They can lose their paycheck, right? Lose the job. Another thing, what's another retail store where you have to go into the people have to greet you?
Used to be,
Dwayne Reed, right? Bloomington. McDonald's. Welcome to McDonald's. How may I help you? Right? There's a manual that says that. Now, on one hand, it's trying to be nice, to try to make a connection, right? But there's another reason behind that. But they systematically do it. Oh, you want that meal? You want to supersize this? I don't know if they do that anymore. But you want to make this large? Something like that, right? There's action behind it. There's a purpose behind it. But there's a policy behind it. And if they do not follow that policy, there's sanctions behind it. Every governmental agency or every administrator is operating under some sort of policy, rule, regulation that's been codified, right? Those of you who work in a nonprofit agency, almost every action that you take is still regulated under some sort of policy and procedure. If it's not a public agencies, it's that nonprofits, right? Every organization in society has some sort of policy or procedure for almost anything that it does, all right? That is rationally organized action. And the purpose of doing that is to be efficient, right? Because if you have everyone doing whatever they want to do, whenever they want to, it is very difficult to maximize the effectiveness of the limited resources that any organization has, right? Social action is voluntary. So voluntarily, wake up when we want, go to work when we want, right? Give somebody a quarter, a homeless man a quarter, or sandwich when we want, right? But it's different. Pay our taxes when we want to, right? Park where we need to when we want to, right? But without rationally organized action, someone there enforcing, that's there to enforce those rules that have been agreed upon by society, then, for the most part, it's very difficult for society to operate as efficiently as possible. All right? Let me,
There are 7 billion people randomly scattered around the world. Each and every one of them has to consciously make hundreds of decisions on a daily basis. Decisions based on knowledge and understanding. Rational action and calculation are however, understand it, and how did we get here? By finding the best possible means to a given end, getting from one point to another with minimum effort and achieving maximum result, or just by simply finding the one best way. Constantly, we are becoming self-involved in searching process of efficiency, a search that never stops, and even bureaucracy as the optimal form is being rationalized. Before we used to put files and documents into folders. Now we store them on a memory stick, transferring them to a hard drive. Everything is efficient, with minimum effort needed. Thus, an emphasis is put on quantity. Everything is efficient, with minimum effort needed. Thus, an emphasis is put on quantity and calculability, leaving quality in the background. By switching to digital photography and MP4 and emails, the natural world has been exchanged for megabytes. Greater RAM, processors, bigger hard drives allow users to achieve maximum speed and storage in our silicon era. Computers process terabytes of information and reduce the business storage costs by keeping data in the system memory, ensuring rapidity and efficiency. The use of credit and debit cards has been made possible due to technological progress. We rationalize by knowing the exact measure, precision of details, and calculating probabilities. Therefore, we eliminate surprises by calculating probability and achieving standardization and identity. Wearing a uniform and providing the exact same service every time. We're usually in a system of emotional labor, behaving in a certain acquired way. We try to eliminate differences and make the world predictable. A simple movement is known and expected to generate the same result as it last time, reducing the effect of the variables and making them predictable even in a system as changeable as the internet or the stock market. To ensure this predictability, we apply written rules and regulations in organizations. We use discipline to control the human factor and the possible inconveniences it may cause in the system. In order to use software, we must accept terms and conditions. In order to use software, we must accept terms and conditions. Even greater control is achieved by substituting human with non-human technology, eliminating human error. With machines directly connected to making decisions, we live in a world dominated by systems and follow the rules. We now live in a world which is starting to look militarized. So, is rationalization fully rational? Can we really measure and control everything? Trying to progress in the most efficient manner and to gain control based on calculation and prediction, we are trapped in our own deception. We substitute quality for quantity and try to label and put everything into order. However, the banks, as one of the ultimate structures of rationalization, trying to find the optimum means, have led us to one of the greatest financial crises, creating irrationality through the use of rationalization. Computers and technology, using our genuine abilities to think and talk to skills, rules and regulations are creating a dehumanized world. A world where we don't have creating irrationality through the use of rationalization. Computers and technology, using our genuine abilities to think and talk to skills, rules and regulations are creating a dehumanized world. A world where we don't have personalities and communicate less. Anyone who doesn't fit into the fourth model is in reality controlled by the system. A good manager should see the world not only in a functionalist way, but also have an interpreter attached to his work to find the best approach. Use different types of rationalization in different situations based on accumulated knowledge, using mathematical and logical reasoning in order to provide maximum efficiency. And so we leave you with a question. Is rationalization full rational?
I thought that was a good video. Some students put that together. explain this concept right there. What are some of the, this was the fast jump, this is a major jump. We're talking about waiver, early 1900s, 1912. Let's just show the video, 2010, 2011, right? But what is the main impetus that they were showing? What's the trend? Technology, efficiency. And what is the underlying trend? What is the technology used to make things efficient by doing what? Systematizing in order to cut out human error, right? So you develop a system. That system is based upon rationality, right? Rational rules. Underlying rationality, the goal is efficiency. And in order to do that, humans, they make errors. They sleep late. They have families. They have lives. They're not computers, robots. They get sick, right? So you have this trend to digitize, systematize, right? But even if, in some jobs, human beings have to carry out the work. And even in that, it's to systematize. Create rules, regulations, policies, and procedures for everything that's done, right? But you still have this trend to digitize. For example, each of you have phones, right? If you want to get somewhere, if you don't know where to go, what do? You go to Google Maps, right? They'll tell you how to get there. Your bank, right? But how do we pay for things now? Debit card, electronically, right? Why is that? Convenience, efficiency, most of all, security. It's more accurate. You don't have to worry about anyone slipping a bill or two at the till. Or more, if any of you have worked at a fast food restaurant or retail, at the end of the night you have to cash, you have to count all the cash. Sometimes you're $1 up, $2 down. It happens. I did it. Especially when I first started college, I worked at a place called Jack in the Box. They don't have them here. It's like McDonald's. A little city hat, uniform. I had fun. A lot of my friends I worked with, they went to college, the same college, the community college I went to. Had a good time. Every once in a while I was accurate. I don't know. People using the machine becomes a lot more accurate. Okay. What else? Computers, right? Now we use computers. Before that we had typists. Before that we had more files. Right? What about school books? Where are they going to? The Kindle, the tablets, right? Any of you been to flew in internationally or even domestically at JFK?
Yeah. They take your picture now with your passport. They take your picture for your passport, you just scan your passport and it takes a picture of you and go to customs.
Exactly, right? Before they had someone doing it. The goal is to try to speed up the long line. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? But the goal is there. What about when you're walking outside the building? What do they have? A what? The automatic door, but what's right in front of that automatic door? Sometimes you see people, there's cameras, right? There's somebody sitting down looking at everyone that goes in. If you're in the UK, they have little lights that flicker to get you to look up, right? So they can check your eyes, so they can scan your eyes, right? Also, there's an electronic person that's sitting there like this. It's a picture of someone, right? It's digital. It's not a person welcoming you. It's a digital screen. Right? What about the grocery stores? What are they doing? Self-checkout. It used to be for every 4 tills, there used to be 4 persons, 4 individuals. Now, there's 1 person managing 4 to 6. Right? They don't always work. Person has to walk over and scan, all right? But calculations have been done, all right? What about security? This goes both ways. It makes society more efficient and effective. But it's also power. Whoever's in administration controls the power. Every one of your phone calls that you make on those lovely cell phones that you love, need, they're monitored. All this information goes into a major database. It's sorted, sifted through computers. And if for some reason, some red flag comes up through the computer, then someone goes and reads it, right? It's a security concern, right? There are a whole myriad of areas in which this rationalization of society, first of all, is necessary for the functioning of a complex society. But for every rule, regulation, policy, and procedure that's created to make society more efficient, every individual in society has to give up some level of freedom. It doesn't work both ways. That is the challenge of a democratic society. Well, a challenge that will never go away, but a challenge that each and every administrator is on the front line of. So, this lecture, the main concept, building blocks of Orthodox administration. Woodrow Wilson, the key is the politics-administration dichotomy. All right? Separate politics from administration. Why? Because the theory of their time was to wrestle these public agencies from the grip and stranglehold of the boss politicians. Secondly, you have Taylor, the concept of scientific management. Break every component of the work down, find the most efficient and scientific methods to find the most efficient and effective method for carrying out the work. Third, organize your agencies, your public agencies, based upon the concepts of bureaucracy, jurisdiction, hierarchy, lifetime appointment, specialization, so forth and so on. These are the building blocks. And from there, we're going to go in to how these building blocks impacted and really advance the development of governance in the United States, and how it can be applied to really any management of any agency moving forward. Because every agency, whether public or private, was developed based upon these theories. Any agency, any organization, public or private. Okay? All right. I'll be here. I put these questions here. These are reflective questions. These are not homework assignments. The lecture that's uploaded to Angel, they're not homework. They're just reflective questions. And submit leave your homeworks here.
Yeah, no, I don't know how we're going to do this. I think it comes down to, probably the pay, the register, and all that bureaucracy. Okay, hard now. Yeah, I mean, it's nature of
That's a nice
instead of